Hello and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lyle from For the Region, and I'm delighted today to be sitting down with Jane Davidson in the run-up to the Green Economy Conference that we're hosting on the 22nd of November. I'm really keen to talk to Jane about her new role, which is chair of the Net Zero 2035 Challenge Group for Wales. Welcome, Jane. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you, Dawn.
Jane, I'd love to hear a little bit about the background of this challenge group that you're chairing. I think it came out of the cooperation agreement between Labour and Plaid Cymru and a desire to find a realistic path forward. Tell me about the challenge group and how it's been set up.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're calling it Wales Net Zero Challenge 2035. And it comes from the cooperation agreement that was initially signed by Plaid Cymru and the Welsh Labour government in 2021, although they didn't approach me, either party approached me until late summer of 2022. And what I was asked to do, and these are the words in the cooperation agreement, was to provide independent advice to examine potential pathways to net zero by 2035. The current target date is 2050. This will look at the impact on society and sectors of our economy and how any adverse effects may be mitigated, including how the costs and benefits are shared fairly. We support devolution of further powers and resources Wales needs to respond most effectively to reach net zero. So that was the challenge, and it's a very big challenge, because when it talks about the current target date is 2050, what it's referring to is currently in the UK, the date by which we should reach net zero across the whole of the UK in law is 2050. So effectively, what I was asked to do was to lead a piece of work which accelerated that date by 15 years. And I suppose one could argue that if we were successful in broad terms, in terms of the request that I've been given, that therefore we would be able to propose to the two political parties that they would be able to bring the legislative date forward from 20 to 2035. So this is a really ambitious piece of work. And in fact, the only reason I accepted it was because it also says this will look at the impact on society and sectors of our economy and how any adverse effects may be mitigated, including how the costs and benefits are shared fairly. So I felt that since it was two parties and therefore 2/3 of the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd members who are committed to this, since it was very much in the spirit of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, that actually if we could be completely independent of government, if we could create the narrative around our work using the ways of working and the goals from the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, I felt that there could be a really important piece of work done in Wales, after all, still the only country that has legislation to put future generations along with current generations at the heart of its thinking, and thus the only country in the world to have a legal mechanism to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals that have been signed up to by all UN members to deliver by 2030. So I felt it was another real opportunity for Wales to look in a really ambitious way, but also in a really fair way as to how we could achieve net zero in a way that actually helps save more carbon emissions and starts us on the path a lot earlier.
I think that context of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is really important here, and I'm sure you agree, as you say, because The race to net zero in and of itself is not completely uncontroversial, is it? Because things like farmland being bought up for building solar farms or for forestry, for kind of carbon offsetting, and yeah, as you mentioned already, the fairness of it, fear about job losses. There are lots of people who are concerned, aren't there, that the race to net zero in and of itself might lead to negative impacts across society. So that dovetailing with the 7 wellbeing goals seems to me incredibly important. How have you comprised your group of collaborators on this? Who's involved in putting together the recommendations?
Everybody can see the members of the group on our website, which is netzero2035.wales. And what I've done in asking people to come and join me on this journey, I suppose it's going to sound a very strange starting point, but grumpy and ambitious was really what I was looking for, is people who have absolutely excellent reputations in their sectors for delivering very high quality work, often of global standard, but who felt that governments and other organizations were not moving fast enough. And I wanted to bring together a group of people like that, because I wanted them to help me determine what is possible, taking into account that background of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And so if you look at all the members on our website, you will see that they all have extraordinary expertise. They might have it in finance or in governance or in risk or in energy or transport or food or buildings. But we are not having representatives. These are individuals. But the way we're working is for each of the big challenge areas, and these are the challenge areas that contribute most in terms of emissions, and that is food, transport, energy and buildings. We've asked people in my group to set up separate reference groups so they can take in evidence, they can go and talk to people, they can find out what the best is across the world, they can engage more people in this dialogue. And so the intention of what we're doing is, through the reference groups on those emission reduction areas, we have 2 further reference groups. One is in the context of what is the future of education and the future of work, because that will be critically important about how we change what people do away from the sort of take, make, waste economy that we're in now, or many of us are in now. I know there's some fantastic work going on in Wales and indeed in our region in terms of addressing those issues. But generally, we still live in a fossil fuel economy that is linear. And how we move away from that in terms of creating different forms of an economy is going to rely very importantly on how we educate and how we engage people in the future of what work is going to look like. So the way we've framed our working is to have those reference groups overseen by what we're at the moment calling a domains group, which therefore looks completely opaque to the outside world. But the job of the domains group is to look at all those really important issues about, well, what will enable behaviour change? What are the risk factors, both in acting or not acting? How can it be financed? Which elements are financeable by the state and which elements need to look for private sector funding? We've determined that we're not going to go on unproven technologies, which I think is a really important message, because carbon capture and storage has been promised since I was a minister in 2008 and put up my first ground chart at the time, and is still not delivering. So we very much want to work within the spirit of Zero Carbon Britain, which was written by the Centre for Alternative Technology, about what we can do now. So what we're aiming to do is have work on all of those specific challenge areas, overseen by a domains group that examines risk, opportunity, legislative opportunity or barrier, all of those issues, and then come to the public spring of next year to ask in a very open way, if we were to propose this kind of 10-year pathway, so we go from 2025 to 2035, what needs to be in place to make that happen in a way that is politically plausible? Because at the end of the day, without political plausibility and without our outcomes being in manifestos or accepted as really strong evidence-led pathways, then we won't be able to get the kind of change that is being asked for by our initial challenge by 2035. So it's basically, it's a systems approach, a nested systems approach. And I'm the generalist chair of some grumpy but ambitious specialists. Actually, they're not all grumpy, but they're all very ambitious. I think I'm probably the grumpy but ambitious one. And that together, we will be looking at creating evidence-led pathways. Now, one of the really exciting elements of this is that our work is underpinned by the Wales Centre for Public Policy, based in Cardiff University. It's a very, very well-respected, internationally well-respected academic group. And what they're doing is that for each of our challenges, how do we achieve Wales net zero in food, in energy, in buildings, in transport, for example, they are giving us the latest academic evidence in response to our challenge. So those people working on our reference groups will not only have the evidence that comes in externally, and we hope that members of For the Region will contribute towards that, but also they will be working with the best academic evidence about what pathways work, particularly where they already have a strong basis of evidence behind them. So our working plan is collecting evidence by Christmas, synthesizing it in the first 3 months of next year, going out with some draft conclusions about the kind of conclusions that we're likely to propose, and testing those in a very informal way, because this is not government. This is utterly independent of government. Testing in an informal way about whether people like the ideas, but even if they don't like the ideas, what would help them on that journey if it looks like the best evidence-led route, and then putting all of that together in a report to Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru before the end of term in 2024. So we've got a very big job, which we're doing in a very short time, but we hope that in our doing it this way, we will help other countries starting to look at pathways, because it's deeply shocking to find, I'm afraid, Dawn, that once again, Wales is ahead of the game in looking at this, that although all countries have signed up to some kind of climate commitment, targets, legislation, degree pathways, nobody seems to have really started in a very formal way yet. So I think our work could be of help to other countries, to other governments, to businesses, to local authorities, to public sector organisations, to private sector organisations, in terms of looking at how one can achieve this change, and very importantly, what needs to be in place to make it happen, to ensure that adverse effects may be mitigated, costs and benefits are shared fairly, and that we understand the impact on society and sectors of our economy.
Very exciting, Jane, and I really share your view of the importance for Wales and Wales's role in leading the world in finding these achievable, politically acceptable pathways towards net zero. And from our perspective in For the Region, we would like to see South West Wales leading Wales in that journey too. So it's an exciting opportunity, dovetailing with the Green Economy Conference in November, for businesses and citizens, residents, communities and organisations to start feeding in evidence, really, isn't it, during this kind of evidence gathering process over the next few months. What sort of questions do you think we should be asking ourselves as businesses and people across South West Wales, and what sort of answers are you looking for? What sort of evidence will you be gathering?
Well, we actually, I think that if people go and look at our website, they will see the nature of the way in which we are asking people their views. So, for example, in terms of food, we're asking, how can Wales feed itself by 2035? In energy, how could Wales meet energy needs by 2035 while phasing out fossil fuels? In buildings, how could Wales heat and build homes and workplaces by 2035? In transport and connections, because it's also important to look at the digital issues here. How can people and places be connected across Wales by 2035? And then what can education, jobs and work look like across Wales by 2035? So we do see this as a big opportunity. It's almost the opposite to the way government works. We're not putting out a consultation and inviting people to feed back on our consultation. We're asking the questions that, in fact, we need to be asking across Wales at all levels and all times. Because if we just look at the extraordinary events of this summer linked to both heat and water both in drought and flooding, you know, we don't know what is coming down the line. So we do need to be prepared. And obviously, we'll be much better prepared if we work together on 10-year pathways to meet the appropriate outcomes for Wales, rather than lurching from one unexpected shock to another. Like you, I actually think there's a huge opportunity for all parts of Wales to be leading the way here, but there's particular opportunities in the southwest region and within the area of the whole of the Swansea Bay. Ambitions, not least because of the port of Milford Haven, not least because of the industrial energy challenges, and not least because actually one of the big challenges is also about ensuring that agriculture becomes net zero as soon as possible, because it's one of the areas that the Climate Change Committee, which is the group that advises all governments across the way in a formal way about their climate change activity, has said that at the moment Wales couldn't achieve net zero till 2055. And one of the areas that needs to be addressed, therefore, most urgently is the agricultural emissions. So we are open to evidence, and we're particularly keen on evidence where we can demonstrate that there are emission pathway reductions and that they fit with the 5 ways of working from the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act, which are thinking long term, thinking preventatively, integrating outcomes in relation to the goals of the Act, collaborating with each other in terms of getting best outcomes, and involving people about whom decisions are being made. Now, it's very challenging working in that way, but we won't get public acceptance or political plausibility without that. And the size of Wales makes that much more possible than other places, indeed in the UK, but actually it's a very good size in the context of demonstrating that we're big enough to have international importance and small enough to talk to each other. And the goals of the Wellbeing Future Generations Act are laid out very clearly, and in the sense of they're looking at how do we become prosperous as an innovative, productive and low carbon society? How can we enhance our biodiverse natural environment? How can we become healthier, not necessarily by the amount of doctors and nurses, but how do we live in a society in which people's physical and mental well-being is maximized? How can we become more equal? Because we know that more equal societies have better outcomes. How can we create a Wales of cohesive communities, of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language? And how can we create a Wales where whatever we do in Wales is also the way we work abroad? So this is not about offshoring Wales's emissions in a way that's carbon offsetting, which you referred to in your question. This has to be about how we look at all aspects of what we do. We become much better at measuring it, and we become much better at seeing what the economic, social, environmental and cultural opportunities are for this wonderful nation of ours as we move forward.
Well, that's a lot to think about, and certainly some really important questions that we all need to be asking ourselves. I certainly think for everyone listening to this and hoping to come along to the Green Economy Conference in Swansea in November, please do bring your best thoughts, your views, and particularly your knowledge, the insight that exists out there across our region from organisations and businesses and communities who are already doing the trailblazing work to find their own way forward to a more sustainable future. That's the sort of evidence that we need to shine a light on and demonstrate what can work, what is already happening, and the expertise exists out there across the region. So it's about coming to the event with all your evidence, your best ideas, your views, what you would like to see happen. And it's a real opportunity for that to feed into policy making for Wales. The purpose of the Net Zero Challenge 2035 group is to advise government on what's possible, and so that will start to really shape what happens here in Wales, and as Jane has said, hopefully across the world. But please do come along on the 22nd of November. The Net Zero Challenge is just one of many integrated challenges that we'll all be talking about and sharing knowledge and insight about, but it really is about finding those realistic pathways forward, and no one else is doing it, so let's try and shape that insight here in Wales. Thank you so much, Jane, for coming and sharing a bit about the project, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the 22nd of November and supporting this initiative. Very exciting as it moves forward.
And I'll just finish with a quote from my favourite philosopher, John Rawls. Do unto future generations what you would have had past generations do unto you. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.